Hey everybody, and welcome back to Split Couch Games. I'm Scott,
And I'm Ben.
and this is Couchcast number 68. And
Yes, sir.
what?
I said yes, sir.
All right. Ben's saying weird things again, as always on the Couchcast. So once again, kind of a slow news week as we just finished up the second month of the year, aka February. So we're gonna be kind of talking about something that we've touched on in the past. I believe, at least, like Ben and I have talked about it outside of the podcast a couple of times because we have very differing views on this. But to introduce the topic, Metal Gear Survive came out. Hideo Kojima was not involved, and it was
Obviously.
poorly received. Yeah. If you don't know about that, then just look up Hideo Kojima and Konami fight, I would assume.
Fight. You make it sound like they got into a boxing ring.
Hey man, it's the new hotness.
Yeah, I suppose you're not wrong.
But yeah, so it kind of begs the question of, one, like, if a lead creative leaves a thing, is there a reason to continue creating that IP? And this is going to inevitably go into how do you know when an IP is over, or is the IP just out of ideas, I guess? Like, is 20 games too much in a series or whatever?
I see what you're trying to say. It's slowly having dribble out of your mouth. And I think maybe you need coffee this morning. I have coffee. I haven't actually consumed my coffee, and I know that you're allergic to caffeine, so maybe you just need a cold shower or something. I don't know, but
I had a weird night of sleep. It's I'm gonna be a little out of it today. Ben, take the lead. Go.
To do like a quick top-down summary of what you were trying to say, we're going to be talking about Metal Gear Survive. And branching off of that, we are going to be talking about whether or not we think video game franchises, in a broad sense, should be continued to be worked on after the main creative force behind it has left. Whether that creative force is a particular studio or maybe just a singular person or a small group of people, that part is, kind of irrelevant. But just the main creative force, if it leaves, should the series continue on? And barring that, how many games is too many games within a franchise? And to attack that point, I guess, I feel like it is entirely dependent on the franchise itself and what type of franchise it is. Because I know that you threw, 20 games out there as kind of just like a ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
But Final Fantasy is getting pretty close to that.
Supposedly, Final Fantasy is getting pretty close to that, isn't it? It has to have over 20 games, right? Including like handheld and...
Yeah, and spin-offs and that kind of... Like, if you include, like, Final Fantasy Tactics and all that kind of stuff. And then there's 10-2, and... Yeah, they are... If they're not over 20 already, then they are extremely close.
Keep talking. I'm going to do some check-in.
You're going to do some quick maths?
Quick maths!
Anyways, so for a video game franchise like Final Fantasy, I definitely feel like there's not really an upper limit. And I feel like part of that is because the franchise as a whole is... It's not even really like a franchise in the traditional sense. It's a franchise by name and style only. Like a Final Fantasy game is a Final Fantasy game. The only thing that you're going to get out of it is a JRPG. And that's totally fine. but it's not like, a Halo or a Mass Effect or something where the story is continuous and it builds on each previous installation in the series and everything like that. There are some that do build on each other. Like I said before, there's Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2. And those are directly related, but I believe that outside of that, by and large, nearly every Final Fantasy game outside of those two is relatively self-contained. And I mean, I'm not in any way a Final Fantasy game expert. I don't know, nor have I played all of the entries into the franchise.
What? You haven't played, like... I don't know. It looks like there's 15.
Well...
Doing some quick internet search.
That's wrong.
I don't know, man. No, there's
15,
no, like... You go to the Wikipedia and it doesn't
is,
just give you a list of games.
Well, yeah, because that would be too easy. 15 is the number that they're on right now. And so, like, that's just...
I guess that's true.
As far as the ones that they are numerically counting in that regard, 15 is the one that they're on right now. So, assuming that we're going to count Tactics, and I think there's a second Tactics game, and then 10-2, that means they're at least on a total of 18 games in the franchise.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're kind of getting off track, like we do. My point is simply, I feel like it depends on the franchise as a whole as to whether or not, it can ever reach a too many standpoint. Because I feel like games like Final Fantasy are kind of outliers in the sense that they don't build on each other. So although it's technically the same franchise, it doesn't have the same limitations that other franchises do. And that being said, I feel like a universe like the Elder Scrolls, or maybe even Dragon Age, or to a certain extent, like something like Mass Effect, where the universe itself is pretty massive and immersive, you can't really hit a too many point with those franchises. You can very obviously hit a point where it's like the games just aren't good anymore, but I don't think that's necessarily a saturation problem as much as it can become a, story, writing, whatever problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, Star Wars is kind of like another prime example. Like, I don't know that there would ever be a point where there's too much Star Wars so that you're essentially just like reliving the same moments over and over, because that universe is so big, it is so fleshed out and that kind of thing. And I know we're not going to get into, the fucking episode 7 being the exact same thing as 4 or anything like that, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, you bring up an interesting point that, like, you can't have, like, eventually, like, you have so many stories within a universe that you don't want to ever, like, repeat yourself, basically, like you're saying. I don't know if that necessarily is dependent on the game genre, or even, like, if they're disconnected stories. Like, I think that's just, like, a matter of how creative and how precise a writer can be. Like, I don't know if that's the right word that I want right now, but basically, like, dealing with what is already in canon and adding on to it. And that's obviously a skill in and of itself. So I think that you get to that, like, if you have a skilled enough writer that is passionate about the project, I think, like, you can continue the story indefinitely. I don't think it's based on genre or anything like that.
I mean, neither do I, because I mean, Halo, I think, is a game franchise that could potentially go on for a very long time. But if you ask me, because I know that you're saying that, like, something like this is relatively genre agnostic, and I agree mainly because of, game universes like Halo, where it's a first-person shooter and it has this wonderfully in-depth universe.
Yeah.
But I feel like the main problem is there are really only so many stories you can tell with, go from point A to point B and kill shit along the way.
Yeah.
Because I feel like shooters inherently lack that depth that RPGs often attain. Especially, franchises like the Elder Scrolls, where it is pretty much like you can go do whatever you want. Just don't, it's like we put like these roadblocks basically in the way so you don't accidentally like fuck yourself over from beating the main quest and that kind of thing.
Well, so with Halo in particular, I think that there's definitely at least from my circle of gamer friends that I've talked to, there's sort of an exhaustion with the franchise at this point, where they don't care as much as they used to. Like, Halo 3, Halo Reach was like kind of the peak.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't really care anymore. But I don't know if that's because I think like you bring up a point that like there's only so many ways to go from point A to point B, and especially like Halo 4 and Halo 5 haven't really added new types of enemies. Like there's like the Prometheans, which are new, but it's still kind of the exact same thing where you just shoot them.
Yeah.
And they've added a couple of gameplay elements, like the booster packs and stuff like that make movement more fun. But I don't know if it's different enough at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at is, although the ability to create that depth and everything from a storytelling perspective is relatively genre agnostic, I feel like the gameplay, which is what often drives video games, for obvious reason, I feel like that is severely limited in a first-person shooter type of setting in comparison to RPGs and everything. And I mean, we're obviously not going to see big sweeping changes with RPGs, at least not for a while. When it comes, like in comparison to now versus like when we made the transition from the original Xbox to the Xbox 360 for the Elder Scrolls specifically, for example. We went from like very, very basic, like 3D world, like no physics engine, nothing. Like it was just kind of like, here it is. And then Oblivion came out and it's like there's physics. Like you can have like a chain hanging from the ceiling and you run into it and it moves. And this is amazing. Like if you have like a fucking rope hanging with a bucket, you shoot the bucket full of arrows and then the arrows add weight so the bucket hangs differently and all this kind of stuff. Like all of that was fucking mind-blowing back when Oblivion came out.
Yeah.
And I don't see that type of change happening again with RPGs, at least not for a little while.
Sure.
And I don't know that type of change has really ever happened with first-person shooters. I mean, over the years, first-person shooters have kind of gotten more and more mobile, so it's less about, like, plodding around and being some games, a literal walking tank, and now it's more of like you're less of a walking tank, and you have to take into consideration, like, cover and that kind of thing. But the core gameplay loop, I don't think, has ever really changed.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and like that's absolutely 100% true. But I feel like I almost feel like most developers these days are not taking advantage of the strengths of a linear shooter, where you can really carefully craft moments and.
You want to know who is?
Who is?
Bethesda.
Yeah.
Well, I think Bethesda's just the publisher, but whoever's making Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
I still haven't played the second one because I'm a terrible, awful human. Um,
Well, I mean, me neither.
you know,
So
I don't even think you'd play it if you owned it. I mean, I have the first one sitting out here on disc that you could have borrowed at any point.
oh, I didn't know that. Maybe
I
I'll
told you several times. I'm pretty sure I've
don't
told you
listen to
multiple times
Okay,
on the
me
podcast.
listening to you and me playing a game are completely different things. I won't do either. All right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just like thinking like, even just like going back to like Modern Warfare, 1. You know, there's some really really awesome scripted moments there. Obviously, like the rest of the campaign probably doesn't hold up as well. Then, but more recently, Spec Ops: The Line, we just talked about that. Like that played with like the linear storyline really well.
Yeah.
I think brought some new stuff to it. Could have done with a little bit of a gameplay tweak, but
Yeah.
that's just getting a little
See, but I mean,
particular.
the problem that I think linear shooters and other like super linear games like that have is that because it's so linear, you don't really get the chance to build out the world. You know, you don't get the chance to flesh everything out to the point that even Halo has really achieved. And to be fair, you know, to show my bias, as it were,
Oh, I got my bias after this.
I probably have that feeling because I did get so engrossed in the world of Halo. You know, I read almost all of the books when I was younger and everything, and I've played every single game since then.
Yeah.
And so that probably has a lot to do with why I'm saying this about Halo. Because, I mean, I could have a very different perspective if all I played was the games, and I didn't have any, like, extra lore knowledge outside of that.
Yeah.
So, I don't even really know what we're talking about anymore.
We're talking. We're having a conversation. Stop.
I feel like we've derailed.
No, we're fine. But I think like games today have gone the wrong, or linear first person shooters have gone the wrong way. In that like they're more about like the action experience rather than the story experience. And kind of what
Again,
I mean by that,
you need to play Wolfenstein.
and it's almost like Halo 5 even tried to like work with that, but like I'll talk about that in a second. But in the original Gears 1, there's a scene, like there's a moment where like you got done fighting and then like you walk through a stranded camp, and like make it so that you can't run, like you can only just like casually walk through, and like you see like different stranded and like how shitty their lives are. Like that's a really good world building moment that takes like 3 minutes, but it's there to kind of like break up the action. I don't think games these days are willing to take that risk of quote unquote boring people. And like you look at Halo 5, there were a few missions that were literally just walking around a town, and that felt really weird because it wasn't like, I don't think it was seamlessly implemented. It was very much like, oh, now we're gonna just go walk around and talk.
Yeah, well, I also feel like it was a little disjointed because, like, you still pretty much had free reign.
Yeah.
Like, you could climb on top of shit and scale a cliff.
You were incentivized to get all the collectibles.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Is like, you actually had to get, the things. But, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think, like, because it's all about the gameplay for most developers, Bethesda who is the people that actually developed the game? I don't know, but
of Wolfenstein.
Yeah, Wolfenstein.
And
then Doom is id, right?
I think so.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I just think that like. Oh, and I want to throw BioShock in kind of the linear shooter, like even though it's kind of an RPG, I think I still consider it like a linear shooter. It's a linear game in a really like well designed world, but like you can do new and unique things with the first person shooter genre. Just developers aren't.
Yeah.
They're just like, nah. Like, we're just gonna make some action, and then not that I'm necessarily against this, but then they're like, we're gonna focus on the PvP aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, and to answer your question, it's Machine Games that develops Wolfenstein. Because Bethesda is just the publisher.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's fine. Bethesda publishes a lot of amazing games, whether it's, Prey, Dishonored.
Prey is also another one in this list.
Yeah. Prey is a great game.
Yeah.
That one I don't feel quite fits the bill of, like, linear first-person shooter and everything. Just because it is more kind of like, here is a space station, explore it, and achieve your objective.
Okay, sure.
Because, I mean, I know that there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can finish that game, and I don't know this for sure, because I didn't try it, because I didn't want to beat the game, like, almost quite literally 2 or 3 hours after starting it.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the option to go and get into, like, what was supposed to be the only working escape pod. Like, that was an option. Like, I could just get in and leave. And it was an option very early on.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I almost feel like that's a... No, yeah, you're right. It's not the same. I was gonna say that, like, that's kind of like an extension of the linear storyline, where, like, it's still, like, very clear where you're going. It's not like you're running, like, over here to complete this quest so you can do this thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much like a first-person shooter RPG. Because, I mean, it has, skill points and everything, different abilities, all that kind of stuff. It has an inventory system, quest log, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's kind of like a weird hybrid between a linear and then just.
But
like
hey,
a
it worked.
RPG.
Whoa,
it
doing
did work.
new things instead of just
know.
like.
I mean,
it's probably not new, but like.
Yeah.
It you know what I mean.
It's new to people like you that don't play a lot of games like that.
Well,
because I mean, realistically, like, Dishonored is the same kind of way. Like, you have skill trees, sort of. Yeah, and then Deus Ex is, again, very, very similar. That one's a little more story and dialogue centric, but it's still the same.
I guess
concept.
like what I mean is, like, I didn't mean like new. I just mean like it does.
It's
does
not just point A, point B, shoot things.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so we did get off topic, but I think we kind of like hit the meat of it, where it's like, if you're gonna keep making games in a certain genre, we would rather it be like, do something better than just like, or craft an experience, right? Like, I think that's what a lot of games are lacking, is a carefully crafted experience outside of
I wouldn't say that so much. That is that I feel like a lot of developers, and we're not going to get into like how much of this problem is on the publishers versus the developers or anything, but I feel like the issue that I have, at least, is the lack of innovation. Nobody's willing to go out and try something new. And I'm not saying, it's like remake the wheel. Like, what works, and it works for a reason. But just because everyone has always made their wheel out of stone doesn't mean you can't go and try and make it out of wood or anything like that.
Sure.
And because of that, I feel like it's almost hurt the industry more, because like there are a lot of studios that they create franchises and then they may change them slightly, like they may evolve over time, but they don't ever really do anything like drastic to change.
Sure.
And part of that, again, maybe like the publisher developer relationship that is the standard for the industry. Another part of it may even just simply be, excuse me, another part of it may even simply just be because of technological limitations. Maybe they have these ideas that are grand and would completely revolutionize things, but the technology isn't there, or maybe the hardware can't support it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. It's always been frustrating, and part of the reason I've been playing so much ESO lately is because pretty much every single game kind of blurs together right now for me. Like, if it's a first-person shooter of any sort, whether it's something like Prey or Deus Ex or something like Wolfenstein, like, it's all kind of just blending together into this weird blob in my head because it's all just kind of the same mechanical feel. And nothing really stands out anymore. Like, the stories might stand out, but in terms of like the gameplay and everything, it doesn't. So I played through like all of Dishonored 2 and then all of Prey, and I've technically started Dishonored Death of the Outsider, and it's just kind of like I'm sitting at this point where I don't want to play Dishonored Death of the Outsider because it's literally the exact same game that I've been playing for like the last 2.5, 3, 4 years. And when I say that, I obviously just mean like it doesn't feel any different.
Yeah.
And it's because everybody's just kind of like, okay, well, slap a gun in his hands, and we might give you like some special abilities, but they don't really do much to change how you play the game. They're just kind of there to make you feel like a god.
Yeah. Feel it.
Yeah.
That's why I don't play games.
I mean, that's why you play multiplayer games, because, those have innovated.
Yeah, they have. Don't fight me on this.
How different is Gears 4 from Gears 1?
Incredibly different. The escalation game mode is fucking amazing.
Okay. So,
Like,
a single game mode.
Yeah,
But like, the core gameplay loop. Is there anything substantially different?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Are you sure?
Not entirely. Hold on.
Because I'm just going to tell you how I look at it.
Sure.
I obviously don't play hardly any Gears whatsoever.
Sure.
But Gears of 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can't speak to Judgment because I never played it beyond like an hour in the campaign, and I said fuck this and returned it.
Sure.
But 1, 2, 3, and 4 are effectively all the same. There are obviously differences between them all, like maybe some small, some tweaks were made to movement and that kind of thing, or maybe an additional system was added in. Because I mean, like Gears 4, as far as I know, was the first iteration in the franchise to have the system where you can reach over cover and grab someone and then stab them and they're dead, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a cool thing. And maybe this is just kind of like something that they took a gamble on and then it didn't end up panning out well. But as far as what I've heard from you, that is never a great thing to try and do. It almost always results in you, the person trying to grab, dying. Because it's easy enough to counter. And again, I mean, I'm basing that solely off of what you have told me.
Yeah.
I could be very wrong. I don't pay attention to like pro Gears players or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the industry, when it comes to multiplayer games, has a tendency to fall into these trends. Like right now, I feel like we're hitting like this battle royale trend where everybody has to do battle royale, and that's because PUBG came out and they're like, hey, look at this new thing, and that is great.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Well,
that is what we need.
PUBG, just for clarity, PUBG was not the first.
Yeah, but I mean, like, popularizing and essentially refining that battle royale game mode, like that is the type of innovation that we need. Because PUBG was able to essentially prove that it can be popular.
Yeah.
And then they went with it. And I mean, that is resulting in a lot of like weird spin-offs and everything. Like the fact that Paladins has
Paladins,
yeah. Like the fact that Paladins has a battle royale mode is really kind of weird to me, because that is a hero-based shooter, kind of like Overwatch. So that doesn't really mix well in my brain, but I've never played it, so I can't judge.
Yeah.
And
I feel it.
When you look at franchised multiplayer games, over their lifetime, there is very, very minimal, if any, iteration and innovation.
Sure.
Like, if you look at the Battlefield franchise, there isn't a lick of difference outside of graphics and some like fine tuning and that kind of thing between like Battlefield 2 and Battlefield 1. Which, that sounds fucking stupid. I realize how dumb that sounds, but for anybody that doesn't know, Battlefield 2 came out in like 2007 or something. It was a long time ago, and then there was like Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2, 2142, but that was PC only. And
there's a bunch of others, and then eventually 3 came out, then 4.
Yeah, 3, 4, and then they went back to 1, and then the next one is supposed to be Battlefield V, so like the Roman numeral for 5. The naming convention for the Battlefield franchise is stupid.
Anyway.
So, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. I just, like, the way that you said it, like, so matter-of-factly, like, when they went from 2 to 1.
Yeah, I finished saying that, and I'm like, that sounds like the dumbest thing in the world.
It's not your fault, though. It's them.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, when you look at the life of that franchise, it is still, like, the most popular game modes are essentially, like, a capture the point. And the one time that they did innovate with Bad Company 1, when they made the Gold Rush mode, that is now a staple in the franchise. And since then, there haven't really been any major innovations. It's all just kind of been like re-release the same thing, make the graphics prettier, you know, new maps, that kind of thing. I mean, even when they went back to World War One, like, yes, technically it changed because now we're dealing with old guns and old tanks and that kind of thing. But realistically, the grand scheme of gameplay and that kind of thing didn't really change.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not exactly the best advocate for the franchise.
Sure.
Because in recent years, I haven't really been super up to date on playing them, you know, frequently and everything. I honestly feel like Battlefield Hardline, which was easily the least popular game in the entire franchise, I kind of felt like that was one of their more innovative entries in the franchise, because they had a handful of different game modes that played to the theme of the, like, cops versus criminals, and you know, they had easy ways to customize your loadout and that kind of thing that actually made substantial differences in how you played and that kind of thing. And I don't know, I mean, it just, as a whole, I don't feel like it's changed much. And Battlefield isn't exactly the only franchise that has that problem when it comes to multiplayer games. I mean, like I said, I feel like Gears of War hasn't really changed a whole lot. Like, they added the escalation gameplay mode, which is awesome. Like, that's great.
Fucking awesome.
Because it looks fun. If I cared about Gears of War, I would probably play it and actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it's still really kind of like the same basic game. You know, it's like
Sure.
you tactically analyze what your best option would be between your Lancer and your shotgun. And then if you're good enough with the power weapons, you pick them up.
Sometimes if you're not good with them.
Yeah. And
So I guess like this is something that like you've never been able to understand about me, is like how I'm able to dedicate so much time to a single game. And that's fine. I don't think you're ever actually going to understand it.
I mean, it's
like,
more like the single multiplayer game.
I think it would drive you fucking nuts if I played the same single player game over and over again. Like
It would depend on the single player game, because like if you're like, I have like 800 hours in Skyrim, I'd be like,
Sure.
that makes total sense.
If I was playing Modern Warfare 1 over and over again, you would.
Just the campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You-
I'd fucking
you-
break. I would come in there and destroy every piece of technology you own.
No, but no, like the only way I can explain it, and this is like, it doesn't necessarily like mean that they innovated in any way, but even like up until like a month ago, I just found out something new about how the mechanics work in Gears.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even though I've played it for 11 years, like I don't know when this particular change happened. It's probably 3.
Mm-hmm.
I just found out about it. Like, I'm
Sure.
still learning about this game, and I'm still improving and like seeing myself get better and doing new things that I didn't know were possible. And it's that exploration and that just like improving and like the repetition of being able to execute these things. Like, that's what brings me back to it. And it's that depth that you only get from playing, hundreds and hundreds of hours, that you start seeing
Yeah.
those like subtle things, and like,
Sure.
that's where that fun
But-
comes from me.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's wrong,
Yeah.
but I mean, I feel like this is kind of like its own conversation.
Yeah. I'm like,
Because
again, like I'm not
when-
like I said, that doesn't like solve the innovation problem.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's what I was going to say is like, the problem is innovation, and innovation has to be something that can be easily seen. Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, well, once you get to 1,200 hours, you'll see it.
You
Like-
got this.
You know,
Like at like 10,000 hours, you'll kind of like, something's weird here.
yeah, because I mean, if you ask me, the biggest like game-changing thing that has happened when it comes to first-person shooters that have tried to kind of push away from the mold recently has been Halo 5 and its Warzone mode. I haven't played it in God only knows how long, but the mode where like you have the points and you can get vehicles and everything like that. I feel like that game mode is innovative enough that is the main reason why people still play Halo
I
right
don't
now.
think people play that anymore. I don't know though. I don't know anyone that plays Halo. So
I mean,
if anyone who
it's-
plays Halo, let us know in the comments why you still play.
Well, I mean, it's clearly being played enough because they have, tournaments all the time.
Yeah. I guess that's true. I don't know. But they're not Warzone tournaments, I don't think. I think they're still just like Slayer tournaments and stuff.
I mean, sure, but still.
Yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying, but by the way, that mode is very reminiscent of the Overrun mode in Judgment, and that was innovative, and got shat on. So
I mean, if you want to get like super callbacky, not that you know what this game is, but realistically, it's innovative of even what I'm about to reference is probably still not the most or the earliest rendition of it, but Command and Conquer Renegade.
sure, yeah.
That multiplayer gameplay was pretty much exactly Warzone, except in Renegade, it was like you could become like different infantry types and everything as well as ordering vehicles, and it had this whole like meta of like, oh well, if you destroy the power plant, everything costs twice as much.
Yeah.
And then if you destroy like the war factory, they can't get tanks and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
I don't know. Anyways,
I'm actually curious. I think I should download Judgment and have you play Overrun and see what you think of it.
does anybody even fucking play Judgment anymore? Would we be able to find a game?
I think we would. There's like Overrun was actually like really good. Like I would say it was like 80% complete in terms of like being a good mode. I felt like there was like a couple progression things that needed to be expanded on and some more maps. But like the way that it worked was so good. Like it was actually fun, and it's one of the reasons why I thought that Judgment was actually going to be good. But like the problem is that they split their community by having regular multiplayer and that. And they really should have just like said, hey, if you want regular Gears multiplayer, just stick with Gears 3. If you want to try this Overrun mode, Judgment's here for you, baby. Just come play. But anyway, we're at 40 minutes. We didn't really discuss anything that we were supposed to discuss. But I think we had a good conversation.
Yeah, I would agree.
If you guys want us to like talk about like the idea of like creators leaving a IP or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's what our topic was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about like you for some reason jumped into the third part of the topic, which was like.
Well, that's because that was the part that like I felt like I could immediately comment on.
Sure.
Because I don't actually have like any franchises that
anyway.
You know, whatever. You're just jealous.
So if you guys want us to talk about that, like, you know, we'll talk about Gears because Cliffy B left. We'll talk about Halo because it went from Bungie to 343, all that kind of stuff. Let us know in the comments if you want us to talk about that and like what our thoughts are on that, and we will do that in the future when there's no news, which will probably be next week. So, anyway, that's all we got to say?
Yeah, I was just waiting for you to do the outro, and then you kind of like froze for a second.
Yeah. Things happen. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time on Split Couch Games.
Bye.